Most goals allowed in a single game. On January 23, 1944, the New York Rangers suffered a defeat that still haunts NHL history. They were steamrolled by the Detroit Red Wings with a jaw-dropping final score of 15-0. It remains the worst shutout loss the league has ever seen. Ken McCauley, the Rangers goaltender, faced 50 shots and stopped only 35. While he wore the brunt of the embarrassment, the context softens the blow. Many of New York's regulars were off serving in World War II, and the roster was patched together with semi-professional players. Meanwhile, the Red Wings were a powerhouse. Despite that, no one wants to be etched into the record books for being on the wrong end of such a historic beatdown. It's a record that has stood for over 80 years, a testament to just how bad that night was. And for McCauley, despite a courageous effort, it was a nightmare he could never fully shake off. Worst team record in a season. The 1974-75 Washington Capitals hold a record that no team wants to chase. The worst full-season performance in NHL history. As an expansion franchise, expectations were low, but they still managed to fall short. With a dismal record of .867.5, the Capitals earned just 21 points across 80 games. To make matters worse, they allowed 446 goals, averaging over 5.5 against per game. Their lone road win came against the California Golden Seals, another struggling team, and even that felt more like a relief than a triumph. Their goaltending carousel included 5 different netminders who never found consistency. It was a season so horrific that players reportedly dreaded road trips and morale hit rock bottom. Yet, it also served as a case study in rebuilding from the ashes. The franchise eventually found success decades later, but this record remains an enduring reminder of just how tough inaugural seasons can be in the NHL. Most giveaways in a season. In 2016 to 2017, Brent Burns showcased both brilliance and recklessness as a defenseman for the San Jose Sharks. While he posted an incredible 76 points, including 29 goals and 47 assists, he also committed 136 giveaways, leading the league by a wide margin. Burns' aggressive, offensive-minded play style made him both an asset and a liability. Often jumping into the rush or quarterbacking the power play, he had the puck on his stick more than most, which inevitably led to mistakes. While his team largely benefited from his offensive upside, those giveaways often turned into high-danger chances the other way. His total remains the highest since the NHL began consistently tracking the stat. Burns did win the Norris Trophy that year, proving that production can sometimes outweigh blunders. Still, no one aspires to lead the league in turnovers. It's a dubious honor that casts a shadow over an otherwise standout campaign. Worst shootout record. Jay Beagle wasn't known for flashy offensive moves, but his shootout record became its own kind of spectacle. Across an NHL career spanning over 600 games, Beagle went 0 for 11 in shootout attempts. That's a 0% success rate. It's the worst shootout performance by any forward with 10 or more tries. Coaches kept giving him chances, possibly due to his work ethic or success in practice, but it never clicked under the spotlight. Beagle was beloved for his grit, defensive reliability, and elite face-off skills, especially in penalty kill situations. But in shootouts, he became an example of just how different skills translate under pressure. His attempts often lacked finesse or unpredictability, making goalies' jobs easier. It's a tough stat for an otherwise dependable player. While shootouts don't define a career, Beagle's streak became a curious trivia answer and a reminder that even the most hardworking players can have one area where nothing ever goes right. Worst plus-minus career. Bob Stewart's career plus-minus of -257 remains the worst in NHL history. Playing during the 1970s for 3 perennially weak teams, the California Golden Seals, Cleveland Barons, and St. Louis Blues, Stewart found himself constantly outmatched. The plus-minus stat can be misleading, but in Stewart's case, it captured the brutal reality of life on struggling rosters. He was often on the ice for goals against and rarely for goals scored, not necessarily due to poor play, but because his teams simply couldn't keep the puck out of their own net. Stewart wasn't a flashy player. He logged hard minutes, blocked shots, and did what was asked. But year after year, the defensive breakdowns piled up. It's a stat that unfairly follows him, especially given that his effort level was never in question. For fans and analysts alike, Stewart's number is a sobering reminder of how cruel hockey can be to those caught in endless rebuilds. Most teams played for. Mike Sillinger's NHL journey is legendary for one reason. Nobody wore more sweaters than he did. Over a 17-season career, Sillinger played for a record 12 different NHL franchises, a mark that may never be broken. From Detroit to Nashville, Vancouver to the Islanders, his career was a cross-country tour of hockey cities. It wasn't that he was unwanted, he was a reliable two-way center who could win face-offs, contribute on special teams, and bring veteran leadership. But he was constantly included in trades, often to help balance salary caps or sweeten deals. Despite the constant relocation, Sillinger managed to score 548 career points in 1,049 games. His adaptability became his greatest asset. Still, while some players dream of becoming the face of a franchise, Sillinger became the face of NHL mobility. His nickname, Suitcase Sillinger, wasn't just a joke. It was the most accurate summary of a man whose career was defined by constant change. Worst save percentage in the modern era. Andrew Raycroft's 2006-07 season with the Toronto Maple Leafs is one of the most frustrating cases of high expectations unraveling fast. After winning the Calder Trophy with the Boston Bruins in 2004, Raycroft was seen as a future star. But by the time he arrived in Toronto, things had changed. That season, he posted a .876 save percentage across 72 games, one of the worst in the modern era for a starting goaltender. The Leafs missed the playoffs by a narrow margin, and Raycroft faced relentless criticism. His rebound control was shaky, his glove hand predictable, and he seemed to lose confidence as the year wore on. While he did manage 37 wins, thanks to solid goal support, his poor save percentage told the real story. The pressure of playing in Toronto, combined with inconsistent defense, created a perfect storm. Raycroft's career never fully recovered, and his name now lives on in conversations about goaltending stats gone wrong. Fastest ejection? Paul Bissonnette was never one to back down from a fight, but on one infamous night, he didn't even make it past the first 2 minutes. In a 2013 preseason game between the Arizona Coyotes and the Los Angeles Kings, Bissonnette was ejected just 1 minute and 15 seconds into the first period. Why? He left the bench to engage in a fight, an automatic 10-game suspension by league rules. While known for his enforcer role and colorful personality, even this incident was a bit extreme. The league cracked down immediately, handing out one of the most severe early game punishments in recent memory. Bissonnette later argued that he was reacting to protect a teammate, but rules are rules. The suspension cost him nearly a quarter of the season and cemented his place in NHL trivia. While it didn't define his career, it did underscore just how seriously the league takes infractions involving bench departures. Most games played without a playoff appearance. Jay Bouwmeester was one of the NHL's most reliable and durable defensemen, but for a long time, he carried an unfortunate label: the player with the most games played without ever reaching the postseason. Before finally breaking the curse in 2013, Bouwmeester had skated in 764 regular season games without a single playoff appearance. Drafted third overall by the Florida Panthers in 2002, he spent 6 seasons there during some of the team's leanest years. He then moved to Calgary, where expectations were higher, but playoff appearances still didn't come. Despite the streak, Bouwmeester never slacked. He logged heavy minutes, anchored penalty kills, and was often matched against top opposing forwards. When he finally joined the St. Louis Blues and made the playoffs, it felt like poetic justice. In 2019, he won the Stanley Cup. But before that happy ending, his record stood as one of the NHL's cruelest reflections of bad timing and team struggles. Most goals scored in a loss. Scoring 9 goals in a hockey game usually guarantees a win, unless you were the 1985 Edmonton Oilers on one chaotic night. In an unforgettable shootout against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Oilers poured in 9 goals and still lost, falling 11-9. It's the most goals ever scored by a team in a loss. This was the high-flying 80s, where defense was often optional and firewagon hockey ruled. The Oilers, featuring stars like Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and Jerry Curry, were built for speed and scoring. But on this particular night, their goaltending and defense completely collapsed. The Leafs capitalized on every mistake, and the game turned into a track meet on ice. Fans loved the spectacle. Coaches? Not so much. It remains a bizarre statistical outlier, a game where one of the most dangerous offensive teams ever still couldn't find a way to win despite scoring 9 times. That loss still baffles stat watchers decades later. Longest suspension in modern NHL. Raffi Torres' 41-game suspension in 2015 wasn't just a personal low, it was a defining moment in the NHL's approach to player safety. The hit, delivered in a preseason game, targeted the head of Anaheim's Jacob Silfverberg. Torres, already a repeat offender with a reputation for borderline hits, was given the second-longest suspension in league history, only exceeded by a lifetime ban issued in the 1920s. The league cited not only the hit itself, but his extensive disciplinary record. Torres appealed, but the suspension was upheld. It sidelined him for half the season and all but ended his career. While physicality is part of hockey's DNA, the NHL made it clear that predatory hits, especially repeat offenses, would no longer be tolerated. Torres' suspension sent a chilling message to players across the league. His name remains synonymous with the league's crackdown on dangerous play, and the incident is still referenced whenever a new suspension benchmark is being debated. Fewest shots in a game by a team. The Chicago Blackhawks made NHL history for all the wrong reasons on March 4, 1959. Facing off against the Boston Bruins, the Hawks managed just 3 shots on goal across 60 minutes of play, the fewest ever recorded in a single NHL game. Somehow, they still lost only 2-0. It was an era where shot tracking wasn't as advanced, but even by the looser standards of the day, the performance was abysmal. The Bruins dominated possession from start to finish, and Chicago's offense looked paralyzed. No matter the zone time or breakouts, they just couldn't generate chances. It wasn't a fluke, it was a collapse. To this day, teams regularly put up 25 to 35 shots in an average game. 3? That's a statistic that feels almost fictional. For comparison, teams often manage more shots in a single power play. Chicago's ghost game remains one of the sport's weirdest lowlights, proof that even powerhouse franchises have their inexplicable off nights. Most consecutive missed playoffs by a team. The Buffalo Sabres' current playoff drought isn't just painful, it's historic. As of the 2023-24 season, the Sabres have missed the postseason for 13 consecutive years, the longest stretch in NHL history. Once a proud franchise with rabid fans and legendary players like Dominik Hasek, the Sabres fell into a tailspin they haven't escaped. They've cycled through coaches, GMs, rebuilds, and lottery picks. Each season brings hope, and each spring brings disappointment. What makes it even more frustrating is that some years, they've shown flashes of brilliance. Young talent like Jack Eichel and Rasmus Dahlin brought excitement, but not playoff berths. The drought has outlasted presidential terms, entire player careers, and 3 editions of the NHL video game series. Sabres fans are among the most loyal in the league, but patience is wearing thin. Ending this drought would be a redemption story for the ages. But until then, Buffalo holds one of the bleakest records in modern sports. Most empty net goals allowed in a season. Empty net goals are part of the risk-reward equation in late-game hockey, but in 2021 to 2022, the Arizona Coyotes took that gamble too many times and paid dearly. They allowed a record-setting 24 empty net goals, the most by any team in a single season. Whether it was due to over-aggressive coaching, poor puck management, or just bad bounces, the Coyotes couldn't close games. Often trailing by 1 or 2, they'd pull their goalie and watch helplessly as opponents sealed the win with an empty netter. The number became symbolic of a deeper problem, a team that struggled to finish, to defend, and to execute under pressure. While the Coyotes had bright spots with young talent, their empty net vulnerability became a running joke among fans and analysts alike. In a sport where small mistakes cost big, those late-game goals added up quickly. It's a record no team wants to touch, and one Arizona would love to forget. Most hat tricks allowed in a season. In the 1981-82 NHL season, the Colorado Rockies allowed a staggering 24 hat tricks. That's 24 different nights when one opposing player netted 3 goals or more, a record that stands to this day. The Rockies, not to be confused with the later baseball team of the same name, were already struggling as a franchise. But this stat cemented them in infamy. Defensive breakdowns, inconsistent goaltending, and a lack of depth all contributed to the onslaught. It wasn't uncommon for teams to score 5 or 6 goals against them, and often, one player did most of the damage. Opponents must have circled the Rockies on their calendar, knowing they had a shot at personal best nights. The team finished the season with just 18 wins and 49 losses. Not long after, they relocated to New Jersey and became the Devils. But before that move, they left behind a record that screams dysfunction, the most generous team in NHL history when it came to hat tricks. Most goals allowed by a goalie in a single season. Gary Smith's 1970-71 campaign with the California Golden Seals remains one of the toughest seasons ever endured by an NHL goaltender. Over 71 games, Smith allowed a staggering 302 goals. That's an average of more than 4.25 goals per game, a brutal workload that would make even modern-era goalies sweat. The Seals were notoriously weak defensively, giving Smith little support in front of the crease. Despite the chaos around him, he kept showing up game after game. He had no choice. The team relied heavily on him, and he played more than any other goalie in the league that season. Smith's resilience couldn't salvage the numbers, though, and his season became infamous. To his credit, he didn't let that year define his career. He went on to have a long tenure in the NHL. But that single season remains a benchmark of futility for netminders, a reminder of how brutal the position can be when everything around you falls apart. Worst career face-off win percentage, minimum 500 draws. Face-offs are often the little battles that decide big moments in hockey. For Zemgus Girgensons, the 2015-16 season highlighted just how rough those battles can get. That year, the Buffalo Sabres forward won just 35.3% of his face-offs, one of the lowest marks in NHL history for a player taking more than 500 draws. Out of 534 attempts, he lost 346. For a center, that's a catastrophic number. Girgensons wasn't known for face-off dominance before, but this season dragged his averages to new depths. The stat reflects more than just individual performance. It's about timing, confidence, and technique. Losing draws means giving up possession, which often leads to goals against, missed power play setups, and extended time in the defensive zone. To his credit, Girgensons improved in later seasons, refocusing on defensive play and versatility. But the 2015-16 face-off numbers remain a black mark, a reminder that even hard-working players can have glaring statistical weaknesses. Most points in a season without making the playoffs. In 2014-15, the Boston Bruins finished the season with 96 points, more than enough to make the playoffs in almost any other year. But not that year. Despite a 41-27-14 record, the Bruins became the highest-scoring team in NHL history to miss the postseason. It was a cruel outcome for a roster that had battled hard through injuries and tight games. The Eastern Conference was unusually competitive that season, and the Bruins lost out on the final wildcard spot by just 2 points. Key players like Patrice Bergeron and Tuukka Rask had solid seasons, but the team's mid-year inconsistencies ultimately caught up to them. In many seasons, 96 points would get you home ice advantage. This time, it got them nothing. The disappointment stung deeply in Boston, a city used to winning. It served as a brutal reminder that even good hockey isn't always enough. In the NHL, timing and tiebreakers can be just as important as talent. Worst power play percentage in a season. Power plays are supposed to be opportunities, chances to punish opponents for their mistakes. But in the 1997-98 season, the Tampa Bay Lightning couldn't cash in. They finished the year with a power play conversion rate of just 9.3%, the worst in NHL history. For context, even the worst modern teams hover around 15%. That year, Tampa Bay went 33 for 355 with the man advantage. Their passing was off, their entries were sloppy, and their shot selection rarely challenged opposing goalies. The frustration mounted as game after game, their power play looked more like a penalty kill. The team ended the season with only 17 wins and was outscored by 135 goals overall. And there you have it, NHL records that no player or team wants to be remembered for. Some of these are weird, others are downright painful, but they all prove one thing: hockey doesn't pull punches. Behind every great goal or Stanley Cup celebration, there's a stat like this lurking in the shadows. So the next time you see a team giving up an empty netter or a goalie having a rough night, remember, history's watching. Hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more sports breakdowns that go deeper than the highlight reels.